This conference will now be recorded.
Hey, hi guys. So today onwards, we're going to talk about Hive. So this Hive is very, very important from the project perspective as well as interview perspective. So I would suggest not to skip any session from today onwards because every session is really, really important. So what is Hive in the big data world? So I can say that Hive is a data warehouse tool in the big data world. It is basically used to query your big data and perform the analysis on top of your big data. And good thing with respect to Hive is it's very easy because all you need is some basic SQL knowledge. If you know SQL, then think that you already know Hive because Hive and SQL they're almost same. And Hive is mainly meant to process only the structured data in the form of tables. And Hive is efficient for the batch processing. So what is batch processing? So batch processing is something where you get the data at a specific time. Suppose you may get the data on monthly basis or daily basis or weekly basis. Suppose, let's say an example could be you may get the data every day at 11 o'clock in the night, or you may get the data on every Sunday, basically weekly basis, or you may get the data on first day of every month, basically on monthly basis. A simple example could be your mobile bill, right? Or your internet bill, which might be getting generated on the first day of every month. So those are some of the examples for the batch processing of your data. So Hive is really good at doing the batch processing of the data. And Hive was initially developed at Facebook. Later on, it became open source. So now, all of a sudden, why are we talking about Hive? Because when Hadoop started, people started doing the coding in MapReduce. And a lot of people found it very difficult to do the coding in MapReduce because even to achieve a simple thing in MapReduce, you have to write a lot of code, and that involves writing complex Java code. So that's where people were actually looking for a solution which could actually reduce the complexity that is involved in the MapReduce program. Because if you have to achieve a simple thing, let's say we're writing 100 lines of code in MapReduce, and you can achieve the same code, same thing by just writing single line of query in Hive. So that's where people prefer using Hive rather than MapReduce. Also, it is easy for somebody who is coming from non-Java or non-coding background because all they need is some basic SQL knowledge. They can easily work on Hive. And this last point is important. So even though we write the queries in Hive, internally those queries get converted to MapReduce programs in the background. Remember that point. So this is very, very important point to be noted. Let me repeat it. Even though we write the queries in Hive, internally the conversion happens from the Hive queries to the MapReduce programs in the background. And that's taken care automatically. You don't need to do any conversion. So now before going ahead, I want to talk about an important term called as metadata. What is metadata? If you go and look at the dictionary, metadata is nothing but data about data. I'll give an example. So I'll give a very simple example to start with. Let's say that someone sent you a message in WhatsApp saying hi, right? So for the simple message called hi, there are a lot of other things involved, such as the mobile number from which the message has been sent, whether it is a local number or international number, what is the time at which it has been sent, and what is the size of that message, is it in kbs or mbs, and what is the type of that message, is it text message, audio message, video message, etc. So just for a simple message called hi, there are a lot of other things involved, such as mobile number, time at which it has been sent, etc. So the point which I want to make clear here is, here the actual data is nothing but hi, and the other data such as the mobile number, time at which it has been sent, etc. This is also data, right? But there is a special name that I want to give to that. It is nothing but metadata. That is it is data. It is giving you more information about your actual data called as Hive, right? So the point is very clear. If you don't have the mobile number, if you don't have the time at which it has been sent, is it possible for you to figure out who sent you that message? You cannot. So the point which I want to convey here is, without metadata, your actual data is of no use, right? I hope you got some idea about data and metadata. Now let's see more examples. So if I take an email, your email body contains the actual data, right? Email body contains the actual data. But along with that, we have got other data also in the form of the subject, right? Subject of the email. Who is sending the mail from whom to whom, right? Basically sender and recipient. And what is the date and time at which has been sent. So what do you call this? This is also called as data, but there is a special name that I would like to give to this called as MD. Basically, it stands for metadata. So this is data. This is going to give more information about your actual data, which is available in the email body. So let's take one more example. So I have this spreadsheet or an Excel sheet, which is actually talking about the 2016 sales data. So you can see that we have got different information such as month, forecast, sales, and variation. Of course, you have got an user comment also here. So what do you call this? This is nothing but my actual data. But let me ask you a question. Let's say that I don't have this spreadsheet name, and I don't have this first row which is talking about the different column names, and I don't have this user comment. Now, just by looking at this data, is it possible for you to figure out what data that we're talking about? No, right? Of course, the first column you might guess it as a month, but what about the rest of the columns? You cannot make a guess of the rest of the columns. The point which I want to claim here is the metadata, such as your spreadsheet name, the column names, and then the user comment. This is called as metadata. Without your metadata, the actual data doesn't have any meaning, because metadata is something that's going to give you more information about your actual data. One more example with respect to metadata. So let's say that I have some of these files that are stored on my laptop. So along with this actual data D, I have my metadata information also, such as the date at which the file has been modified, and what is the type of that file, what is the size of that file, when was the file created, what are the dimensions of it, when the file has been, if it is an image file, right? So what do you call this data? So that data is nothing but my metadata. So without your metadata, the actual data has got no meaning for you, right? So that is very, very clear. So we have seen metadata in general. We have seen metadata with respect to some examples. Now I'll talk metadata with respect to the databases. So what is metadata with respect to databases? So generally in databases, data is stored in the form of tables, right? So one of the example could be the employee table. So we have a query called as DESC, which is nothing but describe. So you can use describe command to describe the employee table. So if you look at the output here, you have got something called as the column name. Basically, what is a column name? A null question mark represents whether that column is a mandatory column or not, and type represents what is the type of it. Suppose if you take employee record, every employee will have an employee number. So employee number is a mandatory field, hence it is showing as not null. And of course it is of number, so it should be of number type. Then we have got the employee name. Employee name is nothing but a text or string, so it should be of varchar type. And the next one is job designation. It's again varchar type. Then the next one is manager ID, which is again number type. Then the hire date, basically the date on which the employee got hired, it is of date type. And salary is again number type, and commission is again number type, and of course the department number is again number type. So whatever data that you're seeing here is called as metadata with respect to the databases. So we got fair understanding about metadata with respect to databases. Now let's talk metadata with respect to Hive. So in Hive, we are going to store all the metadata in Hive Metastore. What is Hive Metastore? Hive Metastore is nothing but a central repository to store the Hive metadata. Now when I say Hive metadata, it includes the schema and then the location. Now when I say schema is nothing but the structure of your table. That is, what are the different column names that we have got, what are the data types, and which one is mandatory column, etc. So what is Hive Metastore in simple terms? It's nothing but a simple database. So we can use any of these 5 databases as your metadata or Metastore DB. So you can use Derby, MySQL, MS SQL, Postgres, Oracle, anything. We can use any of these as the Metastore DB in Hive. So 2 interview questions here. One is, which is a default database that comes up automatically with the Hive installation? Let me repeat the question. Which is the database that comes up default with the Hive installation? The answer is Derby. Derby is the default database that comes with the automatic installation of Hive. Another interview question is, or another point which I want to make here is, Derby is never used in the real-time projects. So don't say that you are using Derby as the Metastore DB in Hive interviews, because we will never do that. But remaining 4 are equally popular. We can use either MySQL, MS SQL Server, Oracle, or PostgreSQL, but never that we are going to use the Derby as the Metastore DB in Hive. Okay, so now I'll ask you one more interview question. Let's say I'll give you access to the big data cluster. Now you will have to tell me which database is being used as the Metastore DB in Hive. I'll repeat the question once again. I'll give you access to the big data cluster. Now you will have to figure out and tell me which database is being used as the Metastore DB in Hive. So how to find out the answer to the question? I'll show it practically now. So now this is the big data cluster that we have got, which is nothing but the Cloud Analytics.pm. I will right click anywhere on the desktop, say open a terminal, maximize, and I will increase the font, click on view and click on zoom in. So right now I am in desktop directory. If I say pwd, I'm in the desktop directory. So I'm going to go to this place called as etc. So what is the etc? etc stands for editable text configuration. So remember one important point, in any project, always the configuration files are stored in etc path, editable text configuration. So once you go to etc, so here you have to go to the Hive component directory, which is nothing but Hive. So look at the path. I am in etc Hive. So within Hive, you have to go to a directory called as conf. Conf basically stands for configuration. So this path is very important. So the interview question might come as, okay, can you tell me the location where the configuration files of Hive was stored? The answer is this. So this is the place where all the configuration files of Hive was stored, etc Hive conf. So if as a LSF and LRT, this is the place where you can see all the configuration files of Hive. Again, the configuration file can be anything. It can be an XML file, it can be a .properties file, or it can be a .template file. But out of all these, one important file that you should be focusing on is this hive-site.xml file. So couple of interview questions here. They may ask you, can you tell me the Hive configuration file name? The answer is hive-site.xml file. And they may ask a follow-up question in the interview such as, okay, can you tell me the location where this Hive configuration file is available? The answer is etc Hive conf. So these are the couple of important questions that you have to remember. Now let's open this file. Hive-site.xml file is an XML file. The data is stored in the form of XML form. I'll open this file by using vi editor, vi space the file name, hive-site.xml file. Enter. As I told, the data is stored in the form of XML tags. So this is how the data is stored in XML. So this highlighted portion is called as a XML tag called as property, and you can see that the starting of this tag is represented by this property and this ending is represented by this property. And if you closely observe, I can see there is something called as MySQL. Also, I can see something called as metastore here. Also, look at this description. JDBC connect string for a JDBC metastore. So now I can see the terminology called as metastore. At the same time, I can also see something called as MySQL. Now it is very clear that we are using MySQL as the metastore DB in Hive on Cloudera Start VM. So this is how you should be able to figure out the database that is currently being used as the metastore DB in Hive. Right? So this is the place where you should come and then look for your metastore DB data type, database. Now I'll also show you how to connect to this. So now we are sure that we are using MySQL as a metastore DB in Hive. So how to connect to this? So to connect to this, I can say MySQL space hyphen u root hyphen p Cloudera. So here u is nothing but the username and p is nothing but the password. So enter. Now we are able to connect to the MySQL metastore DB in Hive. Now to come out of this, I can type Control and D button on your keyboard. Let me write it here. Control plus D to exit from MySQL. Now when I say plus symbol here, when I say Control plus D, it doesn't mean that you have to use plus on your keyboard. You have to use Control button and D button simultaneously on your keyboard to exit from MySQL. Once you type Control D, it will automatically type bye and you are back to your normal Linux terminal. So a lot of people make a mistake here. When they try to connect to MySQL metastore DB, they use space. They use space after U, they use space after P, which is actually wrong. If you try this, even though we're typing password here, it is still asking me for the password. So basically, this is the wrong syntax that we are trying to use to connect to MySQL metastore DB. So never give any spaces. U is username, Q it as root, P is password, Q it as Cloudera. Enter. That's it. You are able to connect to the MySQL metastore DB. Now, as it is a database, you should be able to see the list of all the databases within that by typing show databases. Type show databases. You can see that there are a list of all the databases that we have got, but we are interested only in this database called as metastore. So let us switch to this database called as metastore by using u space the database name, which is nothing but metastore. So you can see it showing as database changed. We have switched to metastore DB now. Here you can say show tables. So now you can see that there are plenty of tables, but we will not worry about all those. We will just focus on only one table called as TBLS. So TBLS basically stands for tables. Let us describe that table. DESC is the shortcut for describe, and then the table name is TBLS. So I'm trying to understand the structure of this table. You have got plenty of columns here, but we will focus on only two things or three things. TBL ID is nothing more the table ID, table name, and table type. That's it. So this is the place where all the metadata of your Hive tables is stored. So you can even say select star from TBLS. There is nothing right now because we haven't created any tables in Hive yet. We will do that from next session. But for now, this is the place where you should come and look for your metadata details in Hive. So I hope you are very, very clear with this now. So before going ahead, any questions, guys? Any questions so far? I'll wait for a couple of minutes. If you have any questions, please put your questions in the chat box. I'll wait for 2 minutes. Any questions so far? Any questions so far? Okay, when I type DSC tables, it says no database selected. Okay, Danish, so what are you typing? Okay, it should be capital. You should be trying with capital, not small. DSC and TPLS should be in capital, right? If you try this in small, it doesn't work. It cannot recognize it. So you should type it in capital. It should work. And make sure you are connected to MySQL database. And you should be switching to the Metastore DB. If you say show databases, and you have the list of all the databases here, you should be switching to Metastore. Use space Metastore, and then say show tables. So here you should see TBLS. Only then go ahead and type TESC tables. You should see that. Okay. So guys, these are very internal. So if you know all these concepts, you can master your interview as well as your project, right? Because I think none of the trainer gets into all these concepts. That is for sure. Okay, now you got an understanding about how the metadata is stored, how to figure out the database name, how to connect to that, which database to look for, which table to look for, everything, right? So I'll also come back to this table again whenever we create the tables in Hive. So hopefully next week we will see how to create tables in Hive, and we will also see how the metadata gets populated in this respective table. Okay, for now I'm disconnecting from the Metastore DB by saying Control D. Automatically it will type by, and you are back to normal Linux terminal. Okay, now I'll talk about architecture of Hive. So before talking about architecture of Hive, let's see how you will get this question in the interviews. So you will get the question in the interviews directly to explain the Hive architecture, or they may ask you to explain the Hive internals, or they may ask you saying what happens internally when you run Hive queries. So these are the three different ways of asking the same question in interviews. So just be prepared for the same. So now, before getting into the architecture of Hive, I want to show you how to launch Hive. Just open your normal Linux terminal and type Hive, hit enter. You should be able to see that it's going to connect to Hive. So it will take 10 seconds to connect to Hive. You have to give it some time. And whenever you type Hive, you might see these two lines, first two lines. So ignore these two lines for now. We'll talk about these two lines a little later. But for now, just try to understand that as soon as you type Hive, wait for 10 seconds, you should be able to see that you are connected to Hive. So whatever you're seeing right now is called as Hive CLI. Let me also write it down. This is called as Hive CLI. CLI basically stands for command line interface. So you can run this command from anywhere. You need not be in a specific directory. You can type this Hive in any place. Okay. So this is also called as Hive terminal. This is also called as Hive terminal. This is also called as Hive shell. All are same. So if you join any project, if your teammate is saying Hive shell, don't get confused. He's talking about Hive CLI, right? Hive CLI, Hive terminal, Hive shell, all are same. So how to launch Hive CLI? Just type Hive. You should be able to see Hive getting launched. Just a minute. Okay, now we have seen how to launch Hive. Now let's actually get into the architecture of Hive. So to understand this architecture of Hive, you should read this, or you should understand this from left to right. So on the left hand side, you can see something called as UI. UI basically is nothing but the user interface. So user interface is nothing but the place where you're trying to run your Hive queries from. So you can run your Hive queries from either Hive CLI or the web interface or Thrift server. But for now, just think that you are running your Hive queries from Hive CLI. So as soon as you type running your Hive queries from your Hive CLI, the first point of contact is nothing but the driver. The first point of contact is nothing but the driver. So as soon as the driver gets the query, it's going to pass on that query to the compiler, right? So what will this compiler do? The compiler will check whether the given query is correct as per the syntax or not. So if the given query is not correct as per the syntax, immediately it will throw an exception. But let's say that the given query is correct as per the syntax, then it will pass on that query to the metastore DB. So what is this metastore DB here? It is nothing but the database that we just spoke about. It could be MySQL, Oracle, or PostgreSQL, etc. So then this is actually going to check the metadata information, whether the given table is available as part of the metastore DB or not. If it is not available, then it will immediately throw an exception. But if it is available, then it will pass the metadata check, and then it will again send the request back to the driver. The driver will pass on that query to the execution engine. So what is the execution engine here? Execution engine is nothing but the MapReduce. By default, the execution engine is nothing but MapReduce. Then the MapReduce will get in touch with the respective HDFS components to get the data processing done, and finally the results are sent from the MapReduce to the driver. Then driver will take those results and sends it back to the UI wherever the query has been run from. So these are the architecture of Hive will look like. This is very, very important concept. Let me repeat it again. So you can run your Hive queries from the Hive CLI, which is nothing but one of the user interface where you can run your Hive queries from. First point of contact is nothing but the driver. Driver will take the results. So the driver will take the query. It will first pass it on to the compiler. So compiler will check whether the given query is correct as per the syntax or not. If it is correct as per the syntax, then it will go through. Otherwise, it will throw an exception. Let us say the given query is correct as per the syntax, then it will pass on that query to the metastore DB. Then the metastore DB will check whether the given table is available as a part of the metastore DB or not. If it is not available, it will immediately throw an exception. So suppose if it is available, then it will pass the metadata check and it will pass on that query to the driver again. So driver will take the query, it will pass it on to the execution engine, because remember, Hive queries are converted to the MapReduce programs in the background by default, right? So then MapReduce will take care about the executing the given query, and then finally the results are sent by the execution engine to the driver. Driver will take the results and then sends it back to the UI, basically Hive CLI in this example. So let me write it down here so that it's clear for you. So basically, if this is the question in the interviews, this is how your answer should be. So when you run the Hive query from Hive CLI, the first point of contact is driver. So as soon as driver gets that query, driver will pass the query to the compiler. So what will compiler do? Compiler will check if there are any syntax errors in the given Hive query. So if there are any syntax, if there are any syntax errors, if there are any syntax errors in the given Hive query, then the query will fail with parse exception. So again, I will show this practically in the coming sessions. I will show these things practical. I will show you the parse exception and everything. But for now, remember this: if there are any syntax errors in the given Hive query, then the query will fail immediately. Will parse it with parse exception. Now, which component is throwing this parse exception? Compiler. Remember this. So now let's say that the query is correct. There are no syntax errors. If there are no syntax errors, if there are no syntax errors in the given Hive query, then the query will go to the metadata or metastore.db. Now, what will metastore.db do? Metastore.db will check whether the metadata is available or not. Metastore.db will check if the given Hive query metadata is available. Metadata is available. Metadata is available. So when I say metadata here, it is nothing but the table name or database name or column names. So when I say metadata, it could be table name, database name, or column names. It will check if the metadata is available in the metastore.db or not. So let's say if the metadata is not available. If the metadata is not available in the given Hive query, then the query will fail with semantic exception. So remember which component throws this semantic exception? Metastore.db. Again, I'll show this practically. But for now, remember that if the metadata that you're trying to deal with, if the metadata is not available, such as the table name, database name, or column name is not available, then immediately the metastore.db will throw semantic exception. Now let's say that if the metadata is available, then the query will go to the execution engine. So what execution engine? So when I say execution engine here, it's nothing but MapReduce. By default, the execution engine is MapReduce, because remember, whenever you write your Hive queries, it automatically gets converted to the MapReduce code in Java. So execution engine will take care about doing the data processing for you. So execution engine will execute the given Hive query to get the results. So then driver will get the final results from execution engine and passes those results to the UI. Now, when I say UI here in this specific example, imagine that we are running the Hive queries from the Hive CL. So this is the overall process that is involved. So this concept is very, very important, guys. If you understand this concept, most of the things will be very simple. Always understand the architecture plays a crucial role. Right. So let me copy paste this in the chat box so that it will help you out for quick revision. So I've pasted this in chat box. So keep it as reference and then it will help you during your interview preparation. So this is very important interview question. You will get this question in the interview, such as they may ask you to explain the Hive architecture or Hive internals or what happens internally when you run your Hive queries. So now we have seen how to connect to Hive, right? So how to disconnect from Hive? Again, type Control D. So let me write it down here. So to disconnect from Hive also, you can type Control D. To type Control plus D to exit from Hive. So basically, you have to use Control button and D button on your keyboard simultaneously to exit from Hive. So if you see these two lines, so these two lines are an indication. These two lines are an indication that you are disconnecting from Hive. So any questions in the architecture, guys? Anybody have any questions so far? Let me know. I'll wait for a couple of minutes here. I hope this is clear for you. So if this is clear, then we'll talk about how to do some simple operations in Hive. So I will launch Hive once again. Type Hive, hit enter. Again, it will take 10 seconds to launch Hive. So Hive shell has been launched. So type show databases. As I told, Hive is almost similar to SQL. The commands are also almost same. So I'm typing show databases to see the list of all the databases in Hive. So it came with output. Now let us try to understand how to read this output. It's saying that this query took totally 1.369 seconds to run, and it's showing us first one row. So basically it's saying, okay, the query ran successfully, and it took 1.369 seconds to run, and it's saying fetched one row. What is this one row? It is nothing but this default database, right? Now the question is it required that I have to type everything in capital case? Can't I type it in lowercase? Yes, you can do that. If I say show databases, it will still give the same output. But the best practice that we follow in the projects is, if it is a Hive related keyword, keep it in uppercase. Okay. Now to clear the screen in Hive, you have to use Control L. So I'm going to use Control plus L to clear the screen. So I'm going to type Control L now. That will clear the screen for me in Hive. Typing Control L, the screen has been cleared. You can use up arrow on the keyboard to see the list of all the commands that you have typed. Now I'll ask you one more question. Is it required that I have to end every command in Hive with this semicolon? Is this required? Let's answer it practically. So I'm going to type show databases, and I'm not going to give that semicolon. I'm hitting enter on my keyboard. You can see that I'm hitting enter on my keyboard, but the query is not running. Let me give semicolon now, and if I hit enter, immediately the query runs successfully, and I can see the results. So the point which I want to convey here is every command in Hive should end with semicolon, because this is an indication to Hive that, okay, this is the end of my query. Only then the Hive will start its execution. If you don't give the semicolon, then Hive might think that, okay, your query is still not complete. You are still trying to type the query. right? And by the way, we already have a default database in Hive, but we will not use it. For any of the operations, we will never touch this default database. We will leave it as it is. Okay. And to disconnect from Hive, I can type Control D. If you see these two lines, you are trying to disconnect from Hive. Hey, this is for everyone, not only to Danish. My suggestion is to get the best out of this training is don't practice when the session is going on, because you cannot practice. You cannot concentrate on both the things at a time. You cannot read and you cannot practice it simultaneously. So during the session, completely dedicate the session to go through the section and then ask the questions if you have any, right? But for practicing it, don't do it simultaneously during the session. You won't be able to get most out of this training. The best way is listen to the session completely in the live class. Dedicatedly, you have to give 1 to 1.5 hours every day apart from the class to practice it. If you want to practice simultaneously during the class, I won't suggest to do it. So this is for Danish and this is for everyone. Please don't practice during the session. Utilize this session to ask any questions, right? You have to dedicatedly give 1 or 1.5 hours apart from the class to practice it, not during the session, because you cannot concentrate on both the places at a time. So that is the best way to get most out of this training. Okay, I think this is what I want to cover in today's session, guys. From Monday onwards, it will be 1 hour sessions minimum. So just be prepared for the same. If you have anything pending with the sessions that I've covered till now, please finish off them by the weekend. From Monday, it will be 1 hour sessions minimum. So just be prepared for the same. Okay. So that's all I wanted to cover in today's session, guys. Any questions anybody have, let me know. I'll wait for a couple of minutes. Otherwise, we are good to meet on Monday. If you have anything pending, please finish it off by this weekend. We'll meet on Monday. We'll have 1 hour sessions going forward. Okay, so if there are no questions, then we are good to meet on Monday then. See you. Happy weekend. Bye-bye.